Hello, welcome to Manager World Summit. I am your host, Jose Luis Romero. Today, it is my pleasure to introduce to you David Spungin. He is the founder and principal at the Leader Growth Group, a servant leadership, emotional intelligence, and executive presence coaching practice. He graduated from West Point and then successfully led soldiers in the Army for 10 years. He has been running successfully his own consulting business for 7 years, and he has trained thousands of Fortune 500 managers to be better coaches. He is the author of the book, Growing Leaders, 20 Articles to Challenge, Inspire, and Amplify Your Leadership. The title of this masterclass is 3 Coaching Mistakes Managers Make, How to Avoid the Traps and Unleash Your Talent's Potential. David, I'm very curious to listen to you today.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Jose Luis. That's wonderful, and it's wonderful to be with you here today. And really looking forward to engaging some dialogue on this important topic on 3 coaching mistakes that managers make. Maybe I think the best way to start this out is maybe to provide a little background as to where this emerged from. And it's, this is really about 10 years now. I've been working primarily in Fortune 500 organizations, helping to provide coaching and training solutions. And a big part of that, particularly that leader development, management skill set solutions that we've been providing for people and training around was around coaching, right? And so in the 10 years, I've trained thousands of managers in the skill sets of coaching. And one of my favorite exercises that I would do is we would teach the skill sets, and then we would do some exercises, some role play, where we would ask them to practice these skill sets and work with another coachee. And we would do, it's actually not really role play, it was real play. These were real life situations that we were asking them to be coached on. And I would kind of sit behind them and whisper in their ear when appropriate. I would take notes and say, okay, what would I do as a coach right now? And where they were stuck, I might give them a little hint or something to get them going in the right direction. And so over years of doing this, I had compiled all these notes in terms of what I was seeing from managers who were attempting to coach, sometimes for the first time. Often they were managers that had been managing for quite a while, but were trying to learn how to refine their coaching skills. And so I saw these key themes emerge. And so from that, one day I just sat down and said, I'm going to write an article on LinkedIn on 3 coaching mistakes that managers make. And it was really successful. It went viral. People were sharing it all over the place. It really seemed to resonate with people, and and the things that I was offering, helping them to maybe move past some of these mistakes. So that's what this was born from. It's not my opinion. This was really, in many ways, a body of research over years. So with that, I'd love to jump into some dialogue. And really, this is where it really, for me, this is a big question that emerges in almost all training that I have with people. I really want to learn how to motivate people more. From all these skill sets that we might train, motivation seems to really emerge to the top for a lot of managers. And so when I ask people, what do you think, gets people to bring their best place in the workplace every day? If you've been around managing for a while, and you look at your own practice that you might have, been bringing to the workplace, it's really about strong performance incentives, right? If we give people the right incentives, then we're going to motivate them to do great work, positive outcomes. But also, we've got to balance that with some sort of boundaries and some constructive feedback at times, and often, maybe even some consequences for performers. And so we've got that balance, right? And this is typically what emerges from a traditional management style. This is the idea that we provide direction to people. Then we have some element of carrots and sticks of a performance management system. Then we're going to be on target, and we're going to get to the goals and the outcomes that we might get. This is kind of like 1909 thinking, though. This is B.F. Skinner, rewards, carrots and sticks. And so what I found, and one of my favorite books that helped me to really see more about what motivates people was Dan Pink. and his book Drive on the surprising truth about what really motivates us. This was a well-researched book, and it was really aimed at technology workers, primarily, knowledge workers, the modern worker from where I typically coach from. And if he really found there was three things, right? He said there was autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So he said that people want to be self-directed. They want to choose the work that they want to do, who they do it with, and how they want to do it. He said that they want to get better at what they're doing. So they want to be challenged to continually progress. That's the mastery piece. And then they want to connect it to something bigger than themselves. They want to have that they're not just executing tasks, but that there's value in those tasks, and more importantly, even better, is if they align with their values in the bigger world. And so when we have those three things, we get people what I call intrinsically motivated. This is how we intrinsically motivate today's workers: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So we change the question a little bit. Now we have to think about how we get to that a little faster. So what do we get, or what does a modern manager do today to help to unleash autonomy, mastery, and purpose in their talent? And it really, for me personally, this is where I'm putting a little bit of a slant on my lens of how I approach it. I really think there's two skill sets that a manager has to get great at. One, timely, fair, and consistent feedback. Very difficult to do and execute well without provoking defensiveness, but to actually provide the knowledge necessary for people to continuously improve. But then usually following that feedback is the more masterful and artful coaching conversation, effective coaching in the workplace. And so this is where, for me, you really have to invest a lot of time in helping to teach and coach your managers how to be successful coaches. It's a skill set that it's not inherent. It's not something you can just pick up one day. It requires training and work and conscious application of practices to improve upon. I think about Jose. Jose, for me, it was like a 10-year journey to get to the point where I feel like I was really effectively coaching individuals at the highest level. I got my foundations coaching schooling, which was like 18 months of effort. And then from there, it was hundreds and hundreds of hours of sitting down and working on these skill sets and making mistakes, quite frankly, and learning through that process. So I think it's crazy today that we think that we can just sometimes, without any training, ask that managers sit down and coach people well. And maybe we can even just give them a little bit of training, and then again, it's more OJT. It really is a process, but if we do it well and we focus on it in the organization level, watch how your talent just grows. It's amazing. So what do you say we jump into the first mistake I see quite often? I'd actually love to hear your feedback on this too, Jose Luis, in terms of what you see out there. The number one problem that I see is that we're trying to solve the problem. Managers that sit down, they're in a coaching conversation. First thing they say, they're getting some input. Okay, so this is what's going on. I understand. And immediately they go to, well, if I was sitting in your shoes right now, this is what I would do. And boom, they lay out the solution and they go, okay, go for it and do great things.
Yes.
I mean, you've seen that before?
Oh, definitely. Yes.
Yeah.
That's we have it ingrained in our system since we're kids to do that. Yes.
Exactly. I mean, and then I try to explain to managers, no, listen, what you just did was mentoring. It's not coaching.
Exactly. Yes.
So you provided advice based on your experiences. And while that's sometimes very helpful to an individual, and I'm not saying don't do that, if you're wanting to coach better, that's not where we start from.
Correct. Yeah.
You got to change that mindset. And so this particular, I work with a ton of engineering type audiences, machine learning, technical type people who, they're solving problems all day long. And so when we come to the human element of coaching, immediately they apply their technical knowledge to try to find technical solutions to human problems. Boom, throw the solution out there. I'm good to go. Yeah. And even listen, quite frankly, I fell into this trap for years as well. I was an engineer by trade, systems engineer was my original background, and it took me a long time to move past understanding that this is not coaching. Not that it's not valuable, but it's not coaching.
Yes.
So, what I tell people, and in fact, if we look at, the definition of coaching here, from John Whitmore, who wrote a great book on coaching for performance, I think he captures the essence of it beautifully. It's not about providing those solutions. It's about creating learning. It's about creating learning. Now, how do we create learning? Well, it's about asking smart and powerful questions. That is, a huge insight for managers, quite frankly, when they sit down and they really start to deliberately practice advice giving versus smart and powerful questions and how to create them through their experiences. That's the key. Use your experience, but instead of laying out a solution, say, how can I use this experience to ask a smart question? And so when I talk to managers, I say to them, listen, this is the 80-20 rule. You can apply it in a lot of different ways, but in coaching, I offer that you think about it in terms of when you're sitting down and having a coaching conversation, how much are you talking versus how much are they talking? Because you want to be in that 20% side. And how do we do that? Well, you ask questions and you zip it and you listen. And that can be such a challenge for so many managers. And my gut instinct and what I write about often is, why is that? What I feel is that it's about the role. It's about your identity as a manager. So we place this kind of emphasis on ourselves that we sit in the position of authority as a manager. We're supposed to, we're technically competent. That's why we got promoted to this position primarily, is our technical competence. In most organizations, that's the truth. Mm-hmm. And so when people come to me for challenges and have a coaching conversation, my role and my identity is to provide that solution. You got to switch that identity around. You got to think of it as in terms of your identity is to create learning. Your identity is to help to co-create solutions with them. And so that's where, it's like, hey, what's going on for you? And what else? Don't jump to the next, and then what else? And you keep digging and you keep digging. Okay, so what resources are available to you? What obstacles are you facing right now? What's the real challenge here? You're asking the smart questions that are helping them to think through. How could you approach this from a different angle? What would this individual say right now? You're asking, before we jump to co-creating, we're continuously honing and refining the problem through the lens of the coachee. Then once we got all that data down on the table, you notice, by the way, the best 80-20 here is that 20% are what and how questions. They start with what and how. So when I talk to managers, I say, listen, bite the lip a little bit, step back, look at your experience, reframe it in a what and a how question. Watch how it unlocks new ideas. Watch how your coachee that you're working with thinks of something that you didn't, a brilliant idea. And you sit back and go, wow, I could have provided advice here, but now they came up with a great idea that I didn't think of.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
That's the power of coaching, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're trying to do. You hired smart people for a reason, right? Let them figure out their own solutions. And by the way, when they do, that's intrinsic motivation, because my boss didn't tell me what to do.
Exactly.
I came up with it. I want to make sure it get, this I can run it to the ground and make it successful. Mm-hmm. So
intrinsic motivation is so much more powerful than extrinsic motivation. Not comparison.
Absolutely. And I will say it's harder to evoke in people, right? It's easy to apply those external motivators. We set up a system of carrots and sticks and go forward and do great things. We try to manage that. That's management in a lot of ways. Whereas I think that this is more on the leadership side. It's an art.
Can I ask you two questions before we continue?
Sure.
Very quickly, you said earlier, maybe it's not relevant anymore, but I have it out. You said OJT. What does that mean?
Oh, yes, sorry. That's an acronym, on the job training.
Nice. On
the job training. So a lot of industries don't have time to provide training, or the solutions that they provide are just essentially let's put them in the mix and they'll learn as they go.
Yeah, we have in the audience, there are a lot of people from non-English speaking countries And that's, we're not aware of that. Okay, the next one. Before we move on to I don't know if you're going to move, whatever you're going to move to the second mistake or whatever, but you explain what is coaching and use the words of John Whitmore. What is coaching? Okay. What do you understand is the purpose of coaching?
Yeah, I mean, for me, when you're coaching someone, again, it's about creating learning in the conversation. Mm-hmm. So that if that's the end state that you're moving towards, that shapes the entire way that you approach the challenge together, right? Mm-hmm. And so, listen, everybody has a different style from direct. If you look at a continuum of coaching, on one side, it's like highly directive advice giving. And on the other side, it's highly autonomous, where we're asking, questions and being very curious and humble and helping them to unlock their ideas. Most people are somewhere in the middle, but they lean more towards the directive side up front because they feel like that's their role. Mm-hmm. And sometimes when you're working with new people that don't have any experience to pull from, and they're, and they just need advice, you have to switch to that style. Mm-hmm. But what I find more often than not is where you start to demotivate people is when you use that style with really talented people. And more often than not, you got to give them the benefit of the doubt. They'll surprise you.
Yes, correct. Yeah, correct. So going back to the first mistake is to forget about giving advice, telling how to do it and what to do, but forget about that and asking questions. That's to avoid mistake number one.
That's right. That's right. And really, if you want to like get an idea of how you're doing at this, you just sit back and say, am I taking up 20% of the airspace or 80% of the airspace?
Yes, that's a great one. Yeah. Thank you.
Excellent. So let's jump to the second one. And this one's one of my favorites as well. Ignoring emotions in coaching conversations. And again, maybe this is a product of the spaces that I particularly work in engineering and technical spaces. But I can't tell you, emotions are like something we just don't want to deal with. That they're squishy. They're we want to move straight to the technical challenge again, and we want to ignore and push away those emotions that might be involved in the problem. And we're, so essentially, people are facing emotions every day in the workplace. They're getting frustrated, they're getting disappointed, they're getting, they're surprised, whatever it might be. You're having these emotions, but we don't want to talk about it for some reason, especially managers. Managers, for the most part, maybe I'll talk about it for a minute, but I want to move straight on. Let's get to work. Let's get to the task. And so what I find is that this is something that inhibits a good coaching conversation. Because if you want to get to results and you want to get to problem solving, you can't ignore that emotional stuff up front, because that's clouding that individual's judgment. They're not unable to be clear because they can't express themselves in a healthy way. And so what I say to people is, it's data. When you feel the emotion and your gut's telling you something, pay attention to that and actually hone in on it. Spend a couple of moments on it. It's about meeting people where they're at. It's about helping them to express their humanity in this conversation. And so, open a space up. Tell me, I understand you're feeling this right now. Is that accurate? And help me. Yeah, that's accurate. So tell me a little more about that. Your help, it's a frustration. Okay, yeah, I can imagine if I was in your situation, I might feel frustrated in the situation too. A little bit of empathy. Meet them where they're at. Helping them to kind of unwind or unpack that emotion first. And once we get through that, now we can engage in that rational problem solving. Now we can use that prefrontal cortex because our amygdala has calmed down a little bit. And so, I say, don't run from it, run to it. Okay. And this is difficult for a lot of managers because, again, they're personally uncomfortable with it. What I often tell people is, this is one of my favorite tools right here. I use this all the time with my coachees. I use this in training with people. This is called the feel wheel. And what I find is that about only about 30% of adults are able to actually label their emotion that they're feeling in the moment. Actually, Travis Bradbury in his research on emotional intelligence will tell you about 33%. And I've seen it, about a third of people is about accurate. Most people, if they're done some work on this, can get the center of the wheel stuff. I'm feeling fear. I'm a little angry right now. I'm happy. I'm surprised. They can get the big bulky emotions, but the nuances, that's where it's challenging. To like the intensity of the emotions, to language those well and artfully is emotional intelligence in action. And so I have my folks that I'm coaching practice this consistently and helping, by the way, their coachees to get more artful at this. Honestly, I'm not feeling fear right now. What I'm really feeling is a little bit of anxiousness. Now we've got data in terms of the problem and what would help this individual to move through the anxiousness. So rather than going to a technical challenge, we're dealing with the emotional challenge first. And now we're actually really moving the needle with this individual. And so again, this is an art. This takes a ton of practice. Look, I'm still working on this in a lot of ways, because when that amygdala starts firing up, that part of our brain that's responsible particularly for fear and anger, this is really difficult stuff to be able to label in the moment. However, the best coaches don't ignore it. They use it as data to help to support the challenges that their coachee is facing.
I have a question. Based on my experience, most managers are afraid to go there with their employees. Any suggestions for them?
Yeah, for me, it's about you have to do the work on you first before you're able to service others, right? And so So whenever I do a proper program, I have my own programs in terms of leading self, then leading one-on-one in relationships, then leading in teams, and then leading in organizations. And those are all distinct modules that build off one another. But I start with the idea of leading yourself. If you are uncomfortable with languaging your own emotions and expressing your own vulnerability in the workplace, you can't expect others to do the same. So you have to lead by example here. You have to be able to confidently express your emotions in a way that, by the way, when you do so, when you express vulnerability and confidence, it's a masterful combination for really inspiring people. And so, I say that you have to do this work first, understand what you get uncomfortable with, because you know that if it's going on for you, it's going on for your coachee too. That's great data. So now you can really empathize with them and ask the right questions to help them to express themselves so that we can get to the problem solving again, because that's ultimately what we're getting towards. But if we don't deal with the emotions up front for you or for them, it's going to be cloudy. You're going to have a lack of clarity. It's not going to be your best problem solving.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what do you say we jump into the third mistake that I see? And, what do you think so this is a fun one. Taking the bait. Do you have any guesses, Jose Luis, as to what taking the bait might be?
Wow. You got me. Nope.
Okay. All right. This is one that it's almost the opposite of technical problem solving. So the mistake one where we jump straight to solutions. Usually when someone is making mistake number one and offering solutions too quick, it's because they are maybe lacking a little bit of empathy, especially, and also a mistake too, where they're kind of they want to move straight to solving. They're using their head rather than their heart. And so they jump straight in. Whereas this is the opposite. Too much heart, not enough head. And so when I say taking the bait, it's someone who absolutely has the concern and for the individual. They want to see them be successful. And so they're listening to the coaching conversation. They're asking what the challenge is. The person's emoting maybe a little bit their frustrations. They start to empathize with them because I just said, hey, you start with empathy, right? That's where you got to start with. So they're empathizing, they're connecting. And in that moment, they start to collude with them. They're taking the bait. They are not remaining objective anymore.
Mm.
And so what I tell people is you start with empathy, but your role as a coach is to be a sounding board. Your role as a coach is to provide perspective. And so sometimes, we have big feelers out there, people who really love empathy. And so they're connecting and they're going, "Oh my gosh, I'm listening to you. And John is totally wrong here. I agree with you. And this is what we need to do to help John." And we start asking questions if we're having some conflict with John in the workplace, is my example here. And so we start to collude with them to the extent where we're no longer serving them. And so I offer, there's two things you can do to really, two techniques, if you will, that I offer managers to make sure they're not taking the bait too much. And it's really about this idea that there's three sides to a story. When you're listening to somebody, empathize with how they're feeling, recognize, step into their shoes, understand their side. Step one, right? However, there's the other two steps, and that's your job as a coach to help them to see. It's that, what's the other side look like? What's going on for John right now? And then three, what's the middle ground? Because his perspective and your perspective are, there's probably some sense of accuracy to both, but there's also a truth in the middle. And that's where we help them to find so that they can be more influential in how they problem solve this. So what's my technique for that? This is my favorite question for this, is I'll start to empathize. I'll be listening to them. And then I'll say something to the effect of, "Hey," so if I was coaching you right now, Jose Luis, I might say something like, "Hey, Jose Luis, tell me, hey, what's your role in this mess right now? How did you contribute to this?" And it might seem like that's a little challenging to some people, or, a little provoking, and it is, purposefully. I want my individual that I'm coaching to step back, kind of take a moment, get out of their own head, and say, "You know what? I kind of rolled my eyes when he said this," or "I should have talked to him before the meeting. That I surprised him. Yep, that was my fault. I was rushed. I was stressed." So what I'm doing in that moment is helping them to understand, how they contributed to the mess for the purposes of learning, so that they can avoid those challenges in the future. And so, that's part of the equation. And then I might also say something like this. My second technique is as I say, let's bring John into the room right now. So if you're in conflict with John, let's put him right here. All right, John's listening to our conversation right now. What's his story? What's going on for him? What did he see? What did he hear? And so what we do in that is we're forcing them to, again, move out of their head, step into the individual shoes that they might be in conflict with, or where their challenge is, and empathize with that individual. So again, it's that mental, it's a cognitive empathy exercise where you're allowing this kind of three sides to the story to emerge. And then once we lay that out there, then we say, okay, so that's what we're dealing with here. What can we do now? Again, questions, not solutions, asking them what their next steps might be. And then we work through it. How might that play out? What do you anticipate John might say if you say this? How would you react to that? What would your next step be? And helping them process all this is way better than going, "Hey, this is what I want you to go say to John right now."
Exactly. Yes. Like actually to bring a third chair, place the chair there, and you ask the coachee to sit on that chair and take the place of the other person and speak from his or her perspective, so it becomes more real.
Yes, I really like that. I can't wait till we can get back to live training again. I'm gonna implement that. That's very good.
Great.
Yes.
All right. So, anything else you want to add about the third mistake?
I would just say is that this is an art. If you're new to coaching right now and you're recognizing, oh my gosh, I do this one or I do that one, because that's when I sent out the article originally several years ago. So many people in the comments section was going, oh my gosh, I'm a colluder. That's exactly what I do. I have a big heart, and everything they say is the truth, and and I join them. So maybe you practice one of these, consistently. It's about, like I tell people all the time, it's just like going to the gym. When you're trying to build skill sets as a manager,
Yes.
you got to put in the work. You got to, lift the weights or whatever it might be. And over time, you get better, you get stronger, you get more effective. And so, but you can't do everything, right? You don't want to go out and just, try all three of these if you recognize that these are your mistakes, and try to master them all simultaneously. It's a journey. So maybe you pick one of these. Maybe I'm gonna give less advice and ask more questions. And maybe you put a little sticky note, sitting right there right next to your computer that says 80/20. And that's your practice. And you do that for a month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever it might be. Build the muscle around that. Then you start to really recognize, okay, I'm going to really start to focus on the next 2 to 3 months on really paying attention to emotions, being an antenna out there, and like really using my gut to feel what's going on for individuals. So again, it's like breaking it down, being very deliberate about it, and building these skill sets over time.
So number one, just to paraphrase, move from telling, forget about that, asking questions. Put your attention on the emotions, on the emotional side of the person. Don't avoid it, don't ignore it, because you're not in front of a machine. You're in front of a human being with a heart, feelings, and don't get lost in the other person's emotions. Try to stay objective, because your job is to help him or her to learn and to grow, not to get lost. Okay, you need empathy, but don't get lost in that emotional stuff.
Yes,
Great.
and you just helped me to think about two things. The first one is on that first point about asking questions. If you are an advice giver and you've just watched this and you say, I'm going to start to shift to more of a question asking style, don't overdo it. I have a lot of folks that I work with that they swing immediately to the right hand side, and go, oh, I'm going to ask a ton of questions, and that confuses the heck out of people if they're used to you being an advice giver. So you just kind of move the needle slowly would be my recommendation. If you're an advice giver and all of a sudden one day you sit in a coaching conversation and you're asking nothing but questions, they're going to look at you and go, what happened to you, Jose Luis? This is not the same person. So they'll have some emotional reaction to that. So just be more nuanced in it. And then the last point. Oh my gosh, you made me think of something, and I thought so. Don't collude. Don't get too emotionally involved. What was the last thing you said? I forgot it now at this point.
To try to be objective.
Just try to remain objective. Oh yes, thank you for saying that. Now I remember. And part of that objectivity is also to be purposely provocative sometimes. And so when somebody emotes an emotion to you and you empathize with it and there's frustration around it, maybe if your gut is telling you that maybe that's not really justified in this situation, maybe there's some semblance of overreaction. Maybe you offer that. Maybe you say, hey, talk to me about, was your level of frustration commiserate with the action that John took right now? So you challenge them to recognize, am I maybe overreacting a little bit? And in that moment, you're empathizing but providing empathy. Mm-hmm. So thanks for helping me to think about those two things.
Thank you. Great. Yeah, I can see how this article that you wrote on LinkedIn resonated with a lot of people. Yes, it's 3 very common mistakes. I went through training to become a coach, and it was so difficult for me to stop thinking while I'm listening. I'm always coming up with solutions. Oh, I can help him or her with that. Oh, he could do this, etc., etc. But I have to listen. That's it. And then when I listen, I realize is when I can ask the best questions for my coachee.
Oh, so such a difficult skill, Jose Luis. I mean, it's kind of like what I tell people is when those ideas pop up for you, the like coaching mastery is the ability to hold that idea, not forget it, not to let it go to go away, but to hold it and still listen. And and then once we process more data, maybe that idea is no longer relevant. Maybe it's like, okay, that's actually not going to help this person. Or maybe it's, I've now heard them out fully. And how do I use this idea to ask a smart question? That is
And,
so difficult.
and something that I experience so much is that when I am able to ask good questions, the solutions that they come up with are amazing. Wow, I never thought of that. And I had no idea I would never be able to provide such beautiful insight to this person,
It's so funny. I mean, for years when I was kind of in that middle, I wasn't a newbie at coaching, but I was kind of in that middle ground of coaching where I'm still kind of practicing several hundred hours or so. I would sit back and I would have these coaching conversations where I would just ask questions. And at the end of the session, I would be sitting in my mind, I would be judging myself going, oh my gosh, I was horrible. I did no good for this person whatsoever. They must be thinking what a waste of time this was. And they would go, David, oh my gosh, that was so helpful. I know exactly what to do now. And I go, you do? Okay, great. That's fantastic.
Yeah. All right, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Anything else you would like to add, David?
Oh, no, this has been fun, Jose Luis. Thank you so much.
Okay, so one last question before we go.
Okay.
What is one thought, one idea that you would like to leave our audience with?
One thought I would like to leave everybody with is that leadership really is a journey. Okay, it is not something that you get a course or a training or anything in, and despite we're going to have a million resources as a part of this event here, and all of them are excellent resources. But for me, it's about this is a lifelong journey, and it's in service to the individuals that you are leading and managing. And so,
Correct.
it's about putting in the effort, not for yourself, not to advance your career, but really to think about your legacy as a manager, as a leader. When 10, 15 years from now, when people look back on how you led them, on how you managed them, what are they going to say about you? What are they going to remember about you? And really, that's the focus. You're doing all this work right now because you're going to have amazing impact on other people's lives, and that's for me what's most important.
Great. In fact, leadership is about service. Indeed.
Absolutely.
Yes. I wish all the leaders in the world, all those who are in a position of leadership, would get it.
Well,
Okay.
the irony is, Jose Luis, is that when we do this right, when we serve people, when we really put the needs of others before self, and really focus on coaching rather than advice giving, like all these little things add up. And what happens is people, by the way, they start to do great work, and they bend over backwards to make you successful. And the next thing you're advancing, you're growing, you're developing in your career because of that investment in others. And so it's a reciprocal, it works for both parties.
Correct.
It is a mindset thing, though,
Yes.
that I wish, like you, more people would adopt.
Okay. Well, thank you very much again. It's been a real pleasure. You gave 3 critical, powerful tools that I'm sure everyone watching here will be able to use back on the show. Beautiful tools. Thank you very much again, Dave.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
It's been a
Bye-bye.
pleasure. Bye.